Hello, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Tuesday, the series where I review some true crime book or movie or podcast or documentary, and I do it on a Tuesday. Um, Today I'm going to be reviewing a book by Ryan Green called Buried Beneath the Boarding House, and it deals with the story of Dorothea Puente. And I I liked um, I liked it a lot actually. I mean, I didn't like the story. I didn't like what she did, obviously, but I think that the way that the story was told was really quite gripping and quite interesting. I read another one of his books recently because I got like this 12 book package kind of deal. Um, and this is the second one, so he's written like 24 true crime books, which is a lot. But anyway, the one that I read, I forgot what the title is, but it's on my YouTube channel. Um, it's basically about the serial killer who was a sailor, and he was like big and powerful. And I don't know why that one wasn't as fascinating as this one. And okay, so I'll tell you a bit about Dorothea Puente. So Dorothea Puente was born in an alcoholic family. Her mom was alcoholic, her dad was alcoholic. Um, Her dad threatened to kill himself in front of the kids, and then he ran away or he died or something. And then her mom was a prostitute and she fell off a motorcycle and also died. So she was sent to an orphanage with her, I mean, not together, but all of her siblings were sent to different orphanages. And it's not sure whether she had six siblings or 17. Um, but yeah, in the orphanage, uh, she was abused, and eventually she became an adult, and she also had the same profession as her mother did for a while. And she got married to this guy, and basically, she didn't know how to. She was a really great cook, actually, but she didn't know how to care, um, like clean anything. So this was in the 1950s, I guess, when she was first married, and obviously that was quite important back then for a wife to be able to clean well and cook well. So the first marriage kind of faltered and broke up, and then she got married another time to a sailor, and she was bored when he was gone, so she was inviting men over, and yeah, eventually she and the sailor broke up. So she kind of lived a life of petty crime up until she was a middle aged to elderly lady, actually, because she started having this career as having a like a boarding house, and she would take all these people in, and she would murder them and steal their benefits. And the crazy thing is, uh, she kind of built up her image in the Hispanic community as like this pillar of like respectability, and she donated to a lot of good causes, and she was, seen with politicians and stuff. And she went to prison because she was exploiting her uh, boarders, and this was before she killed anybody. But she got out of prison and she started doing the same thing again. And people were like, oh, yeah, yeah, maybe she was wrongly convicted and she was given another chance to do the same thing, even though this is crazy. Part of her parole was that she shouldn't be in the same industry. She shouldn't give lodging to elderly people or um, mentally disturbed or disabled people. So she shouldn't do that. And the very first thing she did after she gets out of prison is to start up a new kind of enterprise doing the same thing, which is crazy. But it's also crazy that she had such a great reputation on the street because she like cultivated a lot of relationships with these street level people by paying them to do things for her, somewhat morally dubious usually. But so they would say, "Oh yeah, she's great," and all the social workers would say, she's great too. Let's give her some more clients." And the book does a very good job of explaining what living in her boarding house was like. It sounds like a really horrible situation because she would drug people to try and control them. And these were people already at the bottom rung of society. There was one guy who didn't want to be drugged by her because he was a recovering alcoholic. Yeah, she kept on doing that, and she hired some guy named Chief to uh, be kind of like a day laborer for her, and he would dig graves basically and get drunk with her. And uh, at the at the very end, she was like, "It's that guy's turn." So she murdered him and then found another person to do the same thing. Uh, yeah, and then finally, why she was caught was there was this guy who was named Bert, but actually his real name was Alvaro. He was like some he was like a Spanish. Well, he was from Puerto Rico. His parents were from Puerto Rico, so it's not like he was an illegal alien or something. Because as you probably know, Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So, uh, but his name was Alvaro, and people just called him Bert because this is going to be important later. People just called him Bert because he would talk very slowly, and some English speaker heard him say Alvaro, and for whatever reason, he thought that it sounded like Bert. So he, Bert, develops a relationship with uh, Dorothea. Dorothea. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Dorothea develops a relationship with Dorothea, and he does the same kind of thing that Chief was doing, but Bert had a much better reputation. People really liked him because even though he had some mental disabilities, he was like a really sweet guy. So he had a friend who was a social worker who was checking on him, and everything was fine at this boarding house. And they had some kind of routine inspection by like a doctor or something. And Bert was complaining to the doctor, like, Dorothea makes me do take all of these drugs, and I feel bad about it, and I don't want to do it anymore. And the doctor was like, "Oh, okay, that's weird." So he got Bert out of the house, and then he he was interviewing Bert by himself, and then Dorothea came, and Dorothea was like really upset with Bert, and that was the last time anybody spoke to Bert because she murdered him later and put him, buried him in the yard, or probably somebody had help burying him. But as I said, Bert had a lot of friends, surprisingly for somebody in his position, because he'd been homeless for quite some time. And they launched an investigation, and they called the cops, and the cops were like, "Oh yeah, he's probably just disappeared," because Dorothea told like his friends that Bert went to live with his uh, sister. And Dorothea was a fabulist, I would say. Like, she invented a lot of crazy stories about herself. Like, she said that she was Hispanic, but actually she wasn't. And she grew up, I think, in Los Angeles, around there. So people would know if you were Hispanic or not. So she moved to Oregon, so people wouldn't know that she wasn't really Hispanic. She pretended to be a Muslim for a while. And that's not really in Ryan Green's book, which is a fascinating detail. Um, so yeah, that's missing. Um, yeah, but anyway, she told this lie to the people who were looking for Bert, and it was pretty obvious that it was a lie because the people who were looking for Bert had been looking for his sister for like years and never managed to find her. And then Dorothea said, "Oh, his sister randomly found where he was living and took him away." So they got the police to come along, and there was like this detective who, ironically, maybe not ironically, probably it was a good thing. He was investigating another serial murderer, and he went to the boarding house and he interviewed all of the people. And Dorothea was really great about creating like this nice friendly environment when there was inspection, so people were playing cards, they were talking, and the police officer was interviewing each resident of the boarding house separately in their rooms, but they were like, yes, 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 everything's great, everything's fine. And one guy shook his hand at the end and put a note, and the police officer's like, and he puts it in his pocket and he leaves. And then he checks the note, and the note says something like, Dorothea was making us lie. We were lying. That's not what happened. So the detective gets this guy out of the house and they have an interview. And basically, the guy's like, yeah, it seems really strange. She's always digging holes. Um, People are sometimes disappearing without saying goodbye to anybody. It's really, really strange. So the police come back and they're like, okay, we're going to dig a hole here. I'm not sure if they had a warrant. Probably they had a warrant. So they start digging a hole and they dig under this tree. And this is really graphic, so I apologize, but it's really well described in the book. Basically, the detective thinks that it's a root that he's pulling on, but he's actually pulling on somebody's leg. And it's a mummified corpse because the way Dorothea would dispose of people is that she would wrap them in plastic and bury them in her yard, which doesn't make any sense actually because then the bodies didn't decompose. Well, they mummified, but they didn't actually decompose. So they were like little plastic sandwich of dead people. Kind of gross. Um, yeah. So they found this one guy, but it wasn't Bert. So, and this is crazy. So they started a bigger excavation and they were finding all of these bodies. And basically, Dorothea goes to the detective and she's like, "Oh, I'm so stressed. Can I leave and go get a drink?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So she basically walks away, gets on a bus, and she went to LA, right? And she was trying to do another scam with a guy when she was arrested. So, oh my. So, I think that the reason I find that story so interesting is I was also watching a thing on YouTube. I forgot what the guy's name was, but it was one of those videos where they're interviewed about their topic. Like you have an expert and they're looking at scenes from a movie. So this guy was an expert in serial murderers, and he was saying what was realistic and what not wasn't realistic about these famous movies connected to serial murderers. And he said one very important thing, which I think really connects with this case, the Dorothea Puente case, which is that, you know, people kind of try to focus on the motivations. Oh, well, I'll finish my thought and then I'll get back to it. People try to focus on the motivations of the killer as if that means something, but actually, finding the motivations of the killer is not going to prevent the killing. What you need to do is you need to look at who they are killing and why they are killing. So there are people who are targeting prostitutes, there are people who are targeting homosexuals, there are people who are targeting the elderly or the homeless. And in Dorothea's case, it's 100% true. She was targeting these people because no one cared, right? And she was only caught because somebody cared about somebody who is usually not cared about. Um, but not an nobody cared enough about him not to put him in that situation, right? So I think that's a good point. And if you're wondering what her motivations are, she was stealing the benefits, right? It was totally financial. Serial killer. She was charged with nine murders, and she was convicted for three, and she died in prison, which is. But she also, I don't know how this is even possible, but I was reading her Wikipedia article, and uh, some journalist wrote to her, and so they produced a book called Cooking with a Serial Killer, and there was like recipes of hers because apparently she was a really great cook, right? So I don't know. I don't think that she got any profits from that book, but that seems a bit in poor taste, if you know what I mean. All right, that's been my episode of True Crime Tuesday. Let me know what you thought about the case of Dorothea Puente. And if you read the book, it's called Buried Beneath the Boarding House by Ryan Green. And let me know what you think. Bye bye.